Okay, good evening. And the last couple of weeks, we've been saying, that we're learning in honor of Refuah Shlema for Norman, and it was nice that we got to see Norman before we started giving the share. And Baruch Hashem, he's uh, he's back at the kids' house and on the mend. And Baruch Hashem, we hope to have Norman and Gail back with us here in Eretz Yisrael very, very soon. Uh, the power of Eretz Yisrael is going to be a little bit of an issue that we're also going to talk about tonight as well. And we're talking tonight about the brit. I'm going to translate as covenant. Maybe the best word is treaty that that Yitzchak makes with Avimelech. Now, Avimelech is the leader of the Plishtim, and the Plishtim, of course, live in what we today call Gaza, but they also controlled Ashkelon. So it's a local story for many of you. And where exactly he lived, we're not sure. He lived in a place called Grar. We identify a certain stream as Grar, but we're not exactly sure where the city of Grar was. But we know Ashkelon was under the control of the Plishtim in this area that they did control. And what's fascinating about this, before we even look at the pasuk, which we'll do in just a minute, is that this is to a certain extent a replay of an incident that happened with Yaakov Avinu, that both Avraham, with Avraham Avinu, that Avraham also went to Avimelech when there was a drought in Eretz Yisrael, and he also lied about the relationship with his wife. I mean, I shouldn't say lied, I should say obfuscated, because in other words, there was their wife, but they referred to as a sister because they were relatives. And the same thing is true of Yitzchak. He is a cousin of Rivkah's. So they weren't totally lying when they said a kinswoman, but they were worried about how should I say, the spiritual atmosphere of promiscuity that existed in the Philistine areas, and therefore they were concerned if they said to their wife that they might be murdered, so that someone could take the wife. So Avraham eventually makes a covenant with Avimelech, and that happens in chapter 21. And over there, I'm just going to read the English very quickly. At that time, Avimelech and Fichol, who also the same names come up again here, the chief of his troops, said to Abraham, God is with you in everything that you do. Therefore, swear to me, since God is with you, we want to make a treaty with you. Okay, so it's not exactly clear what exactly the treaty is about, but this is what it says: that you will not deal falsely with me or with my kith and kin, but will deal with me in the land in which you have sojourned as loyally as I have dealt with you. Now, he didn't deal so loyally, but he's saying that we're going to be fair to one another, and that includes not only our subjects, but our families. And of course, for Avram and for Yitzchak, most of their power was the extended family, although they did have converts with them, but it was mostly a family operation. We'll take a look in just a few seconds at our verse, and we'll see in a few minutes we're going to compare the two experiences. But I want to bring up a famous debate amongst the rabbis, to which I am not going to take sides. The question comes up, is this the same Avimelech and the same Fichol? Are these the same people making this deal with Yitzchak, who a generation earlier made a deal with Avraham? So there are commentaries that say yes, they're the same man, and there's a midrash to that effect. There are other commentaries that say no, Avimelech was a name that many of the kings of the Philistines took, and the name means my father is the king, so it makes sense that that would be a dynastic name. I mean, it'd be like in France, they had 18 Louis that were king of France. So it's possible the same thing is true of Avimelech. And there is an opinion actually brought down by Rav Hirsch. We're not going to see it on the page, that this is the grandson, and that indeed it was a dynastic name, and all the kings, or many of the kings, got called Avimelech. I don't think it really matters that much. I think that it makes sense that even if it's not the same person, that this grandson or son would continue the policies. So we initially saw that they made a covenant with each other. Now we come to Yitzchak, and the verse before the verse that's on the page is what Yitzchak says and does. And what happens is, I'm going back 2 verses. The first verse, Avimelech came to him from Gerar with Achuzat, his counselor, and Fichol, the same name, who was the chief of his army. Is it the same Fichol, or was that also a dynastic name? Whatever. And Isaac said to them, why have you come to see? Why are you coming here? What do you want from me? Because you have been hostile to me and have driven me away from you. He said he knew about the deal. I'm sure Avram told him, and I'm sure, he was a baby at the time, but it's like he was, I'm sure, aware of the dealings with Avimelech and the Plishtim. And he says, look, as far as I'm concerned, you already broke the covenant, the treaty, the brit you made with my Abba. Why are you coming to me? I don't want to see you. I have nothing to do with you. And then comes our pasuk. V'yomru, and they said, in other words, all 3 of these guys, it's Avimelech the king, it's his general, and it's a person named Achuzah, who is some sort of prime minister. He's called an advisor or counselor. Okay. They said to him, Re'u Ra'inu. We're going to spend a lot of time tonight talking about that double language. The translation, which comes from the Jewish Publication Society here, we now see plainly. A lot of people translate, we have surely seen, we have certainly seen, because a lot of times when a Hebrew verb gets repeated, they say it's for emphasis. We're going to see a lot of different interpretations. Emphasis is just going to be one of many. I'm going to say surely, we have surely seen what? Ki hayo Hashem imach, that God is with you. Whoa, we want to make a deal with. Yitzchak says, what are you doing here? You guys have been nasty to me. You've broken the deal you made with my father. Why should I want to talk to you? And they say to him, we want to make a deal with you because God is with you. In other words, they say, we want to make a deal with you because it'll be good for us. What exactly will be good for us? We're going to see a number of commentaries. Vinomar. And then they said, Tihi na ela benenu, benosenu, benenu, ubeincha, v'nichrata brit imach. Let there be a sworn treaty between our 2 parties, our 2 groups, our 2 families, between you and us. Let's make a pact with you. And they make another covenant, another treaty. And again, it takes place at Beersheba. And, one time we say the word Sheva had to do with the number of goats that were sacrificed. Here it has to do with the idea of it's a shvuah, an oath. They may mean the same thing. In other words, the number 7, which we view as a holy number all the time, Kedusha, is quite often represented by 7 days of the week, and we sanctify the seventh day. So seven's like a holy number. So maybe 7 was a number that had to do with making an oath. So this number 7 and the concept of oath may be the same concept, but we're not really sure, and I'm not going to really go into it. But in any case, they both take place at Beersheba. Whether the Sheva in Beersheba stands for 7 or stands for oath, it may be the same thing. We don't know. So Rashi picks up, and we're going to see the first 5 or 6 commentaries we're going to take a look at are going to deal with the problem of how come it says Ra'o Ra'inu. Why we have plainly, surely, we have seen, and it repeats the idea of seeing. When they spoke to Abraham, the word Ra'eh only appears once. When they speak to Yitzchak, it's there twice. Why? Why do they repeat that term? And a lot develops from the repetition of that one verb. First, Rashi. The translation that again comes from Sefaria. I don't know who the actual translator is. He translates it just like the Jewish publication site. We saw plainly. Seeing, we have seen. We saw that we saw. What's that mean? We saw it in the case of your father, and we see it in the case of yourself. The double Ra'o Ra'inu, we saw it with your father, and now we see it with you. So that's why they repeat the term Ra'o. We have eventually come to the conclusion that you are like your father. Why didn't they come to that conclusion when they first encountered him months before this? Perhaps an entire year ago, because they talk about a growing season in between. I think that they just presented themselves as different personalities. Avraham was very powerful, strong personality. Yitzchak was much more reserved and quiet, and in many ways, a loner. He was definitely the quietest of the patriarchs. So we didn't see that you were special yet. It took us at least a year, or at least a growing season to see. And we'll talk about what that means about the growing season in a couple of minutes. And then they said, let the oath that has existed between us since the days of your father continue. Now they kicked him out. And when he tried to dig wells, they filled in the wells. They clearly broke the treaty between the two sides. But now they're saying, no. Let bygones be bygones. Now that we see that God is with you, hey, Yud Kei Vav Kei, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is with you, we want to extend the treaty. So their original position was that treaty was dead and buried with your father. Now they changed their song, now that they see that Yitzchak is a force to be reckoned with, and they want him on their side. Says, let's continue the treaty, and they make a new covenant. Okay, that's Rashi. The Chizkuni, on the exact same point, on why it says Ra'o Ra'inu isn't your father and you. It's two different things that they noticed in the success of Yitzchak. We have seen repeatedly, once and then again. What did they see? Ra'o Ra'inu. What did they see twice? That you have succeeded twice where we have failed. And that has convinced us that God is on your side. So he's going to say right now, what are the two times that Yitzchak succeeded and they themselves failed? Clearly your success is due to you and not to the quality of the earth that you have planted seeds in or dug wells in. Here's what happened. The first thing is you planted seeds, and those seeds grew tremendously. Those seeds grew Mea Sha'arim, 100-fold over what we expected those seeds to sprout and to grow. Now, the name Mea Sharim, for those of you who sometimes come to visit here in Yerushalayim, know that it's a neighborhood. The neighborhood of Mea Sharim, which was founded around 1870, I should have checked the exact year, was called Mea Sharim because the first families moved in Parshat Toldot. So they named the neighborhood, doesn't have 100 gates. They were hoping for 100 families. It took them I think about 15 years till they got 100 families in the neighborhood. And the neighborhood is, if you go deep down Rehov Mea Sharim, there's a block of that's closed. There's gates that you can open and close. And that was the original neighborhood. And since it was outside the walls of the old city, they needed walls and gates to protect them from Arab marauders. I mean, yeah, Arab attacks are not a new phenomenon in Yerushalayim, Litza'arenu Harav, but they really called it Mea Sharim because they dedicated it on Parshat. They first moved in Parshat Toldot, and they hoped it would grow 100-fold, which is what the phrase means, 100-fold. So he planted, and wow, everything grew. Plus, he dug 3 wells, and every time he dug a well, the well had water. Well, they were digging wells and came up with sand. So they said, we saw twice that God has blessed your efforts. You must really be blessed by Hashem. We have noted that since you departed, this earth has failed to be blessed. It is clearly your God who is the cause and who is with you. We didn't have good crops. We didn't have successful wells after you left. Then he says something else between us. We're going to make this the oath that we swear by our deities, which is an interesting thing. We don't know what gods exactly, or God with a small g, that Avimelech prayed to. We believe that the Plishtim, the Philistines, were descended from Greek islands and came by boat to Eretz and to Egypt. The Egyptian, we called them the Plishtim, which means the invaders. The Egyptians called them the sea people because they came from overseas to us. So what gods they were praying to, it may have been like Zeus, like the Greek gods, but we really don't know for sure. Later, the Philistines, in the time of our kings, when the Philistines were a real thorn in our side, they were already by that time praying to the gods from Canaan, the Canaanitish gods. But when they first came in, I assume that they were praying to other gods, whoever they were. We don't know. Nor do I think we really care. The oath that we swear by our deities, us by Hashem and you by some phony idol, shall now be binding both between us and you. He meant that although Yitzchak swears in the name of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, God, right? Such an oath shall also be binding for them who swear by their own deity, whoever that might be. Beinenu is otherwise superfluous. In other words, the reason that it says Beinenu is because even though we're swearing by different gods, we both should honor it. And we are willing to conclude a binding treaty with you and offer to renew the covenant made with Abraham, that it made with Avimelech's predecessor for 3 generations. So the Chizkuni is one of those that believes, like Hirsch and a number of other people, that this is a different Avimelech. They felt the need for this since they're having breached it when they claimed the wells. They broke the treaty. When they kicked Yitzchak away from the wells that he dug successfully, once that happened, they were breaking the treaty. And when they expelled Yitzchak, and they were afraid that Yitzchak might feel free to disregard. So they had to. So he's saying they renewed the treaty. Other people say it's a brand new treaty. Either way, they make a brit. Okay. Hakatava HaKabbalah, who is Rabbi Yaakov Mecklenburg, writing in the middle of the 1900s, 1800s, sorry, 19th century, looks at it from a different point of view. It's not that different from the Chizkuni, but it emphasizes how nefarious these bad guys were. And to a certain extent, I feel more than any of the other commentaries we're going to take a look at tonight, he's talking to us. And you'll see what I mean in a minute. This apology contains falsehoods in which Avimelech claims that he would never do anything wrong to Yitzchak because they see a special relationship with God. And that's a bunch of baloney. Yeah, they already did nasty things to him, and they would again. But now they see that he's blessed. They figure, well, let's see if we can, hitch a ride on the brachot, the blessings from Hashem. And now they want to renew the brit of their fathers. But they make the point that the brit is about each side staying in their own territory. If only we could make such covenants with our neighbors. Okay, so they would only renew the brit after he left their land and went to Beersheba, which is clearly in Eretz Yisrael. That's why they were nasty to him. They didn't want him on their land, even though when he was on their land, they had more water and they had more crops. Nevertheless, they still didn't want him on their land, even though, how history repeats itself, even though most of the jobs in Gaza came from working for us and we provided most of the funds, but they didn't want the whole thing to work. They wanted everything to fail. So so that's why they attacked us in spite of the fact that we supported them. Okay. Clearly, none of this is true. Even though Yitzchak knew their true intent, he taught us to accept the apology of another in spite of its insincerity. This may be the whole basis of diplomacy. That hopefully, somebody on one side is telling the truth, but they make these agreements, they shake hands, they sign treaties, even though they know the other guy is lying and isn't honest. But this is how we have to sometimes work in this world. We have to be as honest, as sincere, and as upright as we can be, but you can't expect it necessarily from the other guy. You read it, written, almost 200 years ago, and it's so sad, and it's still true that we accept apologies from people who clearly don't mean it. Before we go on, I want to flip the page because the Netziv, I should have put the Netziv here. The Netziv on the back side is connected to this, and I apologize, my mistake. The Netziv in the middle of the back side. Now, the Netziv is Naftali Tzvi Yehuda Berlin, who was the father of Reb Meir Bar Ilan. The name Berlin got changed, Hebraicized to Bar Ilan, and he wrote this in around 1890. And again, they said a false apology. So you see how very much connected it is to Rev Mecklenburg on the front side. They lied. For we have surely seen that God is with you. They're saying that after a thorough investigation, they looked into his crop production. They looked into the hydraulic reality of his wells, right? And they said, Re'iyah, we concluded that God is with you to make you successful with hashgacha pratit. So the saying we saw is specifically, again, the two miracles, and we see as a result that God's with you. Therefore, we ignored the word of God in that we meant you harm. We really did mean you harm. We stole your wells. We kicked you off our land. Then they said, let this be an oath. This is to strengthen the matter that will never harm you, neither the kind nor other officers. So in other words, again, we looked and we decided it's a good idea to be on your team, not because we like you and not because we're nice, but because it just makes sense. And I guess that's how a lot of things work in politics and diplomacy. Please go back to the front side, and we're going to take a look at the Mei Shiloach. The Mei Shiloach is the Ishbitzer Rebbe, and the Ishbitzer wrote again toward the end of the 1800s. He was active 1860s, 70s into the 80s. We've indeed seen. So this English translation takes the Ra'o Ra'inu, which we saw plainly or we saw twice, but he says, we have indeed seen. We have seen your deeds and the deeds of your forefathers. That is, with you, I must have a different kind of perception than what we saw with your forefathers. You're different than Abraham. So when we says we see and we see, he's saying we saw something in Abraham, we see something else in you that didn't impress us initially, but the more we know you, the more we are impressed by you. That Yitzchak doesn't come across gangbusters like Avraham Avinu, but the more you know him and the more you see him, you really understand what a great personality he is. Since your attribute is the opposite. Your attribute is the opposite. What's the attribute of Avram? Chesed, kindness, outgoing. What is the attitude and the strength of Yitzchak? Gevura. He's more inner centered. He's quieter. He's more into himself and his family. He stays in the tent. They're very different. He's outgoing. You are the yeshiva bacher who doesn't leave the Beit Midrash. One must look at you to see your strength with greater depth. You required a longer look than we needed with Avraham. As my father of blessed memory said in the name of Reb Bunim of Peshischa. Reb Bunim was called the Holy Yid of Peshischa, who was the founder of a whole dynasty of Hasidim that included Ishbitz, of blessed memory. In the case of Abraham, one could perceive things at first glance. Abraham was in your face. I mean, you looked at him, you talked to him. He was amazing, outgoing, and not just friendly, but powerful. But with Yitzchak, one had to look more deeply. Therefore, concerning Yitzchak, we have the double language. We had to look twice. We have indeed seen, indicating a deeper level of seeing. So in other words, again, the repeating of the word see is because it just took longer for us to realize what an amazing personality you really are. We're going back in time a little bit to the Orach Chaim. Reb Chaim lived in the 1700s. He died in Yerushalayim in 1750. And he's again asking the exact, this is the last one that we're going to talk about, the repetition. We're going on to other things in a minute. Why did Avimelech and company repeat, we have seen? So this is already the sixth answer to that question. There are also other nuances in his remarks, which we need to analyze. Basically, Avimelech and company responded to Isaac's questions by saying that they really intended to respond to all Yitzchak had said. In other words, Yitzchak said, why'd you coming to me? Like you're nice when you kicked me out. You were really nasty to me. What is this, this new attempt to butter me up? As to the covenant concluded between Avraham and Avimelech, according to the Orach Chaim, he's the same person. There's the more midrashic approach that Avimelech was very old. They said, we have seen. What does that mean? Avimelech added, that when he concluded a covenant with Avram, he had not been careful to do it in such a way that it would remain irrevocable. He was saying, when he said, "We have seen," I come to understand that I messed up when I made that treaty with your father. I messed up by not making it permanent. Uh, I messed up. Why did I mess up? Because I didn't think I needed to make it permanent because I knew I might be able to take advantage of his children. Now I see I can't. I wish I had made it irrevocable. Should Yitzchak be angered that Avimelech had not bothered to secure similar guarantees from his brother Yishmael, who was, after all, Abraham's eldest son? He's bringing up another point. In other words, when the deal was made with Avram, it included children. So shouldn't that have included Yishmael? Now, Yishmael didn't live that much further away than Beersheba. He lived in the Negev also, but further into the Negev, but not that much farther away. They explain this by saying that they had observed that it was Yitzchak who was both personally powerful and obviously enjoyed God's blessing and support. That's the double we have seen in the verse. We saw that you are the one we want to make the deal with. We don't have any reason to make a deal with Yitzchak. Now, that can mean we don't see any reason to make a deal with Yishmael because he's so far away, further into the Negev than Beersheba, where Yitzchak mostly lived. But on the other hand, we also don't see any reason to make a deal with him because you've shown that you have inherited your father's relationship with God. We're not assuming that Yishmael is also a miracle worker like you are. So we want to make a deal with you, both because you're closer and mostly because we see you've inherited your father's relationship with God. Miracles happen for you, and we want those miracles to affect us as well. So basically, we're done with the Ra'o Re'inu, but we see that the language has to be explained. I think that the pshat, we saw 6 different approaches, but I think the pshat is we have looked at you very closely. We looked and we looked again. What exactly was the double looking? We saw all those different commentaries, but he's saying we came to the conclusion after careful analysis of you and your behavior that you are worthy, like your father, of us making a covenant with you. We didn't know that before. We know it now. And it took us a while to get to this conclusion. On the second side, the Toldot-Rabbi, we have taken note of the fact that the Lord has been with you. Okay? Based on what we explained, now, this is going back to the story of Abraham and the 3 angels. Remember, he just had his Brit Milah at the beginning of Parshat Vayera. He's sitting in the warmth of the sun to heal, and 3 men appear on the horizon, and he immediately gets up and runs toward them. Why did Abraham, who was sick, get up and start rushing toward the men/angels? That when a person looks at a righteous person, his own powers of perception are enhanced by the fact that he is within the orbit of the tzaddik. Our sages in the Gemara stated that people must visit their Rebbe on festivals. Now, the Toldot-Rabbi, Rabbi Levi Yitzchak of Berditchev, is giving us a famous Hasidic idea. And this idea is really, to a certain extent, based on Abraham and on our pasuk, that when you are in the presence of kedusha, of sanctity, of something spiritually special, not only do you sense it and feel it, but it enhances your perception of the world. Just like, and he's going to say this better in a moment. Just like Avraham noticed that these three men, which the verse calls them, were very special. So he got up, even in the state of being sick, and ran towards them because there was some aura of Kedusha to them. After close analysis of Yitzchak, they came to the same conclusion about him, that they should make a deal with him because they sensed that something was special. And like many Hasidim, he takes this ancient biblical idea and he applies it to Hasidic practice. And the famous Hasidic practice that he talks about is visiting your Rebbe on Chag. And that was indeed a very big issue. Which Chag you go for depended on the Rebbe and the Hasidut. A lot of people went for Rosh Hashanah, but people went for Sukkot, not so much for Pesach. There were some Hasidic groups, but as we know, Pesach is more of a family holiday, and it was harder. People did tend to stay with their families, but some Hasidim would actually leave their family even for the Seder and go to the Rebbe, but there was a little less common. It was Shavuot, Rosh Hashanah, and to a lesser degree on Sukkot that people would visit the Rebbe. They benefit spiritually merely by looking at that Rebbe. I can't really identify so much. I'm a Litvak. What can I tell you? We Lithuanians, Misnagdim, we don't necessarily, but I have in my lifetime gone to meet some very famous Hasidic Rebbeim, and I was always impressed with them and liked them. But I can't say that, that I just by merely looking at them, I felt something special. But okay. Avram had realized that the three strangers who had appeared suddenly were superior beings, as his own powers of perception had been sharpened by their arrival. He felt something when he saw those three men, quotation marks, on the horizon, the Anashim, who ended up being Malachim, angels. He felt something. And the point of the Kedushas Levi, of Rebbe Levi Yitzchak, is the same thing happens when you visit a Rebbe. And that is what was happening to Avimelech. Even Avimelech, who's a Rasha and a terrible person, it still happened to him. It took him a while to get the vibe of Yitzchak, but when he got it, he said, I really should make a deal with him, that it's worth my while. It was this realization that prompted him to run toward these visitors to make them welcome. The repetition of the words in our pasuk here, Ra'o Ra'inu, is to draw our attention to Avimelech and his entourage experiencing these enhanced powers of perception, which is a beautiful comment, but is not pshat, because it clearly took them at least a year to figure it out. Remember, there was an entire growing season from the first time they saw it until now. So yeah, they did have enhanced powers, but it took them a while to use them. So I like the idea, and I think it's a beautiful idea. And I think it's true that by observing Torah giants and tzaddikim, we can improve ourselves. How magical it is on a Hasidic sense, I'm a little skeptical. I mean, that's my Lithuanian skepticism coming into it. Okay. The Sforno on the later part of the verse, Ki haya Hashem imach, that God is with you. We do not want to make a deal with you because we are afraid of you, although I think they were, but because God is on your side. And they saw that they could get something out of this relationship. I think that's important. We did the Netziv, the Rashbam, who of course is Rashi's grandson. Tehina Allah, let there be an oath, which is Beinotenu, which is between us. There should be an oath, a covenant, a deal between us. Between your father and me should remain in force, also between you and me. They wanted the original covenant to somehow stay in force. This had been part of the condition of that pact that neither Avram's children nor grandchildren were allowed to renege on a promise made on their behalf. And I think this is, at the end, the Rashbam, I think, makes a very powerful point that the Rashbam was very, very careful with his language. He didn't say an extra word ever. He keeps everything brief. But this idea at the end is a very powerful idea. We should think about the deals, the covenants, the promises made by our ancestors, and understand that it's our job to fulfill them. And those of us here in Eretz Yisrael feel this very powerfully, that our being here and coming here in most of our cases is about, we want to keep the word of our saintly ancestors who promised, that Eretz Yisrael was important to them and prayed for Eretz Yisrael for millennia. The idea of keeping customs from parents and grandparents is part of this as well. It's a very powerful idea, and the Rashbam just says it very quickly, but the idea should be very important to all of us. And I feel very good when I see some of my parents' behavior in mine. I do something and say, "Oh, wow, that's like my father did that," or "Oh, my mother did that," and once in a while, especially my older kids, my girls, say, "Oh, that reminds me of Grandma Lil, Aleha Shalom," and that makes me feel very good, and that's what the Rashbam is talking about. We should want to carry on the powerful and positive things from those that came before us, and that's true of halachic issues, but social issues as well. And I think it's a very beautiful idea. Steinsaltz is just giving pshat in the pasuk. He's very pithy and to the point. They said, "We saw that the Lord was with you." Okay, since you grew and prospered beyond the status of a private individual, therefore we said, "Let there be an oath of a covenant between us." Now, he's just I really should have done it earlier. He's just stating how since we saw X, we decided to do Y, and we've talked about that already before. I should have just referred to him before. Okay, two more comments that are a little bit off from everything else. I'm not saying forget anything we've done till now, but these two comments are like on a different wavelength. Likutei Maharan. Now, this is Rabbi Nachman, except it's not Rabbi Nachman. This is from the introduction of the book, and the introduction was written by Rabbi Nosson. Rabbi Nosson, who was Rabbi Nachman's secretary, his shamus, his fellow traveler, and he's the one who kept a lot of his sayings. But this as the introduction to this great work by Rabbi Nachman was not quoting Rabbi Nachman like the rest of the book. This was Rabbi Nosson commenting on the nature of the book, and he makes this very powerful, I think, important point. Because aside from those hidden things which are God's, okay, in other words, there are some things that are hidden to us. We call them nistarot. Some people call them Kabbalah, mystical ideas, which he achieved through the land of Israel, and which remain hidden from all living creatures. Also in those things manifest, we saw that God was with them. There are things that are hidden that once in a while you can look at something and say, whoa, I get it. And he's saying that Rabbi Nachman had that kind of light bulb going off moment in Eretz Yisrael, like Avimelech. Avimelech, when he said, we saw that God was with him, it's like, oh, wow, we noticed something. Thus, the teachings which he, revealed after having been in the land of Israel immeasurably eclipsed in insight and level those that he revealed before his journey. Rabbi Nachman came to Eretz Yisrael in 1798 for somewhere between 6 months and a year. We're not exactly sure exactly how long he was here. We know the name of the ship he came from the Black Sea ports to here. We're not sure what ship he went back on. And he was running away when he left because Napoleon was invading Eretz Yisrael, and it seemed like it was dangerous. And he wanted to get back to his family as well. So what Rabbi Nosson is saying is that the entire book, Likutei Maharan, all of the Torahs are from after he was in Eretz Yisrael. He doesn't say that in this comment, he says it in another, because he's saying that this ability to notice things isn't because of Yitzchak, like everybody else said until now. It's because of Eretz Yisrael. They made this covenant in Beersheba. In other words, Avimelech left Gaza, the Gaza Strip, whatever you want to call it, Grar, and came to Beersheba. Coming to Beersheba gave him insight that he couldn't get in Chutz La'aretz, that he couldn't get outside of Eretz Yisrael, which is in and of itself fascinating. But the way Rabbi Nosson says it is that his observation, his comments, his Torahs in Eretz Yisrael immeasurably eclipsed in insight and level those that he revealed while he was back in Europe before he left, before the journey, despite the fact that even previously his holy lessons had tremendously enlightened the world. He really didn't have much following before. Okay, I mean, he's saying this, that he did have some students, but not that many. It's after he came back that he started getting much more popular. The words of his teaching were always amazing, but just as the heavens are high above the earth, so too the ways of the teachings which he revealed after visiting the land of Israel, after coming to Eretz Yisrael, are high above the ways of the teachings which he had earlier revealed, as we explicitly heard from his holy lips a number of times. And he, of course, wrote this after Rabbi Nachman died in 1809. The book came out like 3 years later or so. So what's going on in our story is totally different than everything anybody else said. It's not that he may have come because he saw the miracle of the crops and he saw the miracle of the wells, but he couldn't have seen the greatness of Yitzchak in Gerar, in Gaza. He had to come to Beersheba. He had to come to Eretz Yisrael, the Kedusha, the saint Eretz Yisrael. Then he could say, wow, I see you in your full greatness. Because Avira Da'ara Machkim, the very air, the oxygen of Eretz Yisrael gives us insight and wisdom. And that's what happened in the story. And I think that's a very beautiful approach. Okay. Now, Rav Amnon Bazak, I should have written Rav. I apologize. I served with him in the army. He's a wonderful person and a tremendous Talmid Chacham. He's a Rebbe at Yeshivat Har Etzion. He makes a different point about this concept of brit, covenant, treaty with a bad guy. The term brit or covenant does not necessarily denote a pact between equals. Sometimes they're not. When England, France, and the United States and Russia, signed a treaty with Germany ending World War II on May 8th, that treaty was not a treaty between equals. I mean, Germany was defeated, and thank God, at their knees, and but it's still called a brit, a covenant, a treaty to end the war. Because sometimes it's an agreement of surrender. The difference between the two types of brit finds expression in the distinction between a brit with another party, which indicates a pact between equals, and a brit le, to somebody else, another party, similar to the one with the Gibeonites, Givonim, made by Yoshua. Now make a treaty lanu, with us, because they were defeated. They saw themselves as lower than Bnei Israel at the time of Yoshua. They knew they couldn't win. Here's what's going on in Oz. In our case, our pasuk 26-28, that's our case here, is Avimelech makes a covenant, makes a brit with Yitzchak Avinu, and he says, he says, with you, not to you or for you, with you. What's most important in this entire brit situation is that Avimelech has finally come to the point of recognition. Yitzchak is his equal. Yitzchak may not be a king. He may not wear a crown and have any official position in any government. But when he saw the support he got from Hashem, both in the wells and in the crops, and probably in other things as well, he saw, wow, I have to deal with this person on equal terms. I may be a king, he may be a commoner, but I have to make a deal with him as equals. And this is the first time that we really see Yitzchak as gaining stature in the world stage. It's not a coincidence that the only time that we have HaKadosh Baruch Hu, God speaking to Yitzchak, is just a couple of verses before this. That Yitzchak, who at this point in time is already an old man. His kids are grown. He's a minimum of 80, 90 years old. It's only now that on the world stage, the world starts to recognize Yitzchak. Avraham, already by the age of around 50, according to the Rambam, 40, was recognized as a great person in Ur, and then later in Haran, and then later in Eretz Yisrael, and very quickly. Yitzchak, who we see as someone who doesn't win wars and have this outsized personality and character, he gets there, but he just takes him longer to achieve it. And that's what's really happening in our verse. What's happening in our verse, and this happens just before we get the blessings given to the boys, and we see Yitzchak, how he deals with the situation between Yaakov and Esav. Just before that happens, we see that the world has finally recognized that Yitzchak is indeed the heir to Avram Avinu. He is indeed the second of our patriarchs and is a force to be reckoned with. And it takes this not so wonderful person in Avimelech to make us and the world aware of how great Yitzchak is. It's a shame that when we read through Sefer Breshit, we don't always get the same towering feeling from Yitzchak that we get from Abraham and later from Yaakov and even from Yosef. But Yitzchak was indeed not just one of the Avot, one of our blessed ancestors and patriarchs, but was a force recognized by the world. Took longer, but was indeed recognized and respected by the people around him, and we have to show the same kavod and honor for Yitzchak that we show for the other avot, even though he seems to be the one in the middle that doesn't necessarily get the same attention. But he was a force to be reckoned with, and Baruch Hashem took time, but the world recognized it around him as well. Okay, thank you very much for joining this evening, and especially Gail. Thank you so much. And we're just counting the days till we can get together with you and Norman again. Good night, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.